Welcome back to the Chasing Tone podcast. Today I'm going to do a special little tone tips episode, I guess we can call it. This is a Q&A from two different videos that I have done on YouTube, answering a bunch of customer questions that and viewer questions and fan questions that came about from a big post on the Wampler Tone Group page. So I've got, I think there was like 300 comments or something crazy. So I've got a ton of Q&As that I can probably do more of these type of episodes if you like them. But anyways, this came from a video. So the quality is from like the boom mic from the shotgun mic from the camera. So it's a little different than like the podcast audio, but I still think it's going to be just fine for podcast consumption. So let me know what you think. Let's jump right into Q&A. Well, I decided to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to do a Q&A, and I may incorporate these, I don't know, every now and then. Here we go. First one from Alexander Mack, or Mock. I'm really bad with names, so sorry if I totally butcher your name. What do you think is the hardest type of pedal to get right? I think they're all hard, because I think if something just is really easy, then you didn't really try. So with a caveat. So let's say I'm trying to clone a tube screamer. I'm so familiar with a tube screamer just because I've played one for years and have messed around with the circuit so many times over the past 16 years, something like that, that I just know my way around it a lot easier than if I was starting from scratch. So that is easier, but I still think to get it right, to get it sounding as good as I want it to sound, or as good as I think that others expect of us, certainly, I think it requires just a lot of effort, really, and that's a terrible way to put it, but it's got to sound right. It's got to be accurate to what like one of the best sounding tube screamers. I would want that to sound as good as it possibly could. I would want to put all the options on there that people who buy the pedals would want. Yeah, because I listen to customers a lot. I'm always watching to see what people say about the stuff we put out or the stuff that others put out. I like to hear people's opinions on that sort of thing. It's important to me. I would have to say, Alexander, that really they're all hard to get right and to get into production. In fact, so many times, almost every time, we'll build a prototype or two or three, and like, nope, change that, redo the whole layout, add this part, add this switch, change this filtering, like all kinds of things like that. There's a huge process of designing something, building the prototype, testing it, going back to the drawing board, changing things, build a prototype, test it, go back to the drawing board, change some things. So that happens several times with every pedal. And there are times where I just can't get it right, and so I just don't release it. I just don't. The 30-something pedal, for example, I'd been working on that for like 3 years until I finally released it. And I know some people it wasn't what they expected, but at the time, I thought that was something people wanted. And some people do like that. Some people don't. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. All right, from Jason Roadbush. I'm sorry, Jason. It's something like that. Have you ever considered a collaborative pedal with another builder, similar to what JHS and Boss did with the Angry Driver? I'd love to see a Wampler and Earthquaker collaboration. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I've talked to a lot of different guys about it. A Keeley collaboration would be fun. Maybe something with Josh from JHS. I mean, there's all kinds of guys. TC and Matthews Effects. I love Rick, super sweet guy. Catalan Bread. There's a bunch of guys that I really admire in the industry. Joel from Chase Blue. I mean, there's a bunch of people that would be so much fun to do. The problem really comes down to when you're not selling direct to customer, like Love Pedal, for example, is pretty much he builds pedals. People go to his website and buy them, or to Reverb or eBay or whatever. Where our model is different. We build pedals. Then a distributor gets the pedal, they sell it to a retailer or another distributor if it's internationally, and then that distributor sells it to a retailer. It gets really sticky and really hard to kind of manage everything, whether it's finances and customer service and all this other stuff that goes along with it, warranties. It gets really hard to manage, like if Bob in England or Bob in Denmark has a problem with a pedal, whose job is it to provide customer service for that? Whose job is it to fix a bad switch or a dirty pot or a broken battery cable or whatever the case may be? That gets sticky. I think in situations like that, it gets real easy to kind of lose friendships over that thing, where people start pointing fingers and like, no, that should be your job. And you say, well, but I thought that was going to be your job. I'd rather keep the friendships. I really would. So I would love the idea of collaboration, maybe on a small scale. Maybe we get together and build 5 or something, or 10 or 20 or whatever, and just sell direct to consumer or something like that. That'd be a lot of fun. I'd be open to that. Okay, and Ryan Burke from the 60 Cycle Hum podcast and YouTube page and Facebook pages and Facebook groups, Ryan Burke asks, boxers or briefs? Ryan, I don't think you can really pin a man down like that. I think it just depends on the day. It depends on the outfit that I'm wearing. Maybe I'm wearing something really nice and I got to go with the briefs on that day. Maybe it's more casual. I'm looking for boxers. Maybe it's super casual and I'm not wearing either. There's always that possibility. Chris Haney asks, Midi, or is it away from the simplicity that I find with Wampler pedals? Programmable settings, if not Midi. I would say it's definitely something we're interested in. Without giving too much away, I would say expect to see more things along this line in the future. Bigger chances in the pedal market in general. I think we're going to do a lot of fun and exciting things in the months and years to come. And so yeah, it's not out of the question at all. Sean Hebert asks, what makes you decide to revise a pedal or make a deluxe version? P.S. Love the Sovereign. Wish I could have the boost on a foot switch instead of a toggle. Well, Sean, that's a very good question. What makes us decide to revise a pedal and make a deluxe version? Everything is driven around what our customers ask us, whether it's email, whether it's Facebook comments, whether it's YouTube comments, podcast emails, all that sort of thing, Twitter stuff, Instagram stuff, Snapchat stuff. Any way that you contact us, every time that you do, that generally gets sent to me and I see it and I contemplate it and I think, I wonder if anyone else would like this. I should listen closely and see what others say. That's really what drives everything. It's basically what our customers want. And other times, maybe they don't know they want it, but it still becomes a very cool pedal. Like, for example, we had the Underdog pedal that people wanted us to reissue. I thought a better way to do it, and also Brad thought a better way to do it, was to create the Paisley Deluxe, which has that Underdog side and 95% of the Paisley drive, of the standard Paisley drive side. That's kind of what drives that sort of thing. As far as having the foot switch on a toggle versus a stomp switch, I know, it goes both ways. So we have the Pinnacle Deluxe and Standard, right? Originally, the earlier Pinnacle Deluxe was basically the exact same thing as the Standard, the only difference being that the boost switch was on a stomp style versus a toggle. I think it actually kind of confused people. They were too similar. When you have like 25 products in a line, you really can't have, if you have too many products out there, you start kind of cannibalizing things. So you start losing some customers because there's too many choices. So for example, I think it would be a bad idea for us to have 6 different types of Sovereigns because it's kind of paralyzing. It's like, let's say you're looking at cars to buy and they have all these options and they're all the same price. And you're like, I just don't know. I can't make up my mind which one that should be. That could be frustrating. As a consumer, at least to me, it's frustrating to have so many choices that you're just not sure. That's kind of my thought there. Anyways, I'm sure that if you could find the space in it, I don't know if you might be able to find the space to change the toggle switch, move it over to one side, the on-off switch, move it over to one side, and then maybe hardwire another stomp style switch where the old toggle is, or I'm sorry, take that old toggle out, take a hard stomp style switch, put it on the other side of the box, connect all the wires. There may be room in there to do that. I don't know. That'd be kind of an intricate mod though. Not intricate in a way that it'll take some time and Your enclosure will now have a big hole in the middle of it, so that's kind of ugly. I guess you could rehouse it. I guess you could do that. But then that's kind of a pain in the butt because there's so many pots and you know, where the jacks are and all that kind of stuff. It all has to be perfect or it's not going to fit in the box. And since we make our own boxes, it's not a standard Hammond box. I don't know if you guys knew that. Yeah, we actually make our own enclosures. If you open it up, you'll see Wampler on the inside in the molding. So anyways, yeah, I hope that helps. Derek Milhon? Terrible names. Derek asks, I personally would love to see more recommended settings for effect pedals from the distributor. Since you guys know these pedals like the back of your hand, considering there were certain tones and sounds you were shooting for upon creation, and you could show settings to show how versatile some effects are, and a few companies already send you a few settings, but there are a lot of guitarists out there buying effects with untrained ears, so they're always asking for settings info. Derek, I mean, I've done a video on this before where I kind of showed you can't always go by the settings in a manual or on a website or what your buddy's using on his pedal or anything like that, because it's really so radically individual, even player to player. We've done videos before, like whenever I was doing the podcast thing here with Travis and Max, where we would pass a guitar, the same guitar, same settings, and it would just sound different between each one, just because our playing styles are that different. I mean, I guess you could put some places to start from, but if you're playing through a Vox versus a PV Classic 50, or Classic 30, or a Blues Junior, or an Orange Rocker Verb 50, basically whatever amp you're going into, you may have to crank the treble up, bass down, mids up, mids down. I mean, EQ wise, it's going to be all over the place where it should be set. Volume, I just usually set to unity, and maybe a little bit touch higher, maybe if you want a little bit more volume when you turn it on. Gain, that's how much gain do I want? Do I want just a hint of overdrive? Do I want a bunch of gain? Generally not so, just because you get lost in the mix. Unless I'm playing by myself, then I like a lot of the gain because it covers up all my sloppy playing. That's such a hard thing to ask. It's kind of like, how much ketchup should I put on my cheeseburger? You know, how much pizza sauce am I going to use on this pizza? Well, if you like pizza sauce, you can put a lot of it on there. You know, how much cheese? Well, depends if you like a lot of cheese or not. So that's a really hard question to answer because it's so specific to the exact guitar, pickups, amp and its setting, speaker, which speaker you have. Is it 212, 412? What kind of, what brand of speaker is it? I mean, like all this stuff really plays such a big part on it. I almost honestly feel like it's almost a disservice to put out those suggested settings, because it may sound absolutely wonderful when I write the settings in the manual on this particular amp with these particular settings, with this particular speaker, etc., etc. But whenever you get it on your amp and with your guitar, maybe it sounds completely horrible, and now you think that our pedal sounds bad because the suggested settings from the manufacturer sucked. And in reality, that wasn't the right settings for that particular amp. So, hope this helps you, man. Question is from Carl Hobelman. No, sure. Hobelman? Carl Hobelman. And Carl asks, tacos, burritos, or both? Man, actually, tacos, enchiladas, chili rellenos, Use your words! The chili peppers with the cheese inside. Good salsa, of course. Good salsa is absolutely imperative. And, beans and rice. But the chili relleno, the chili pepper thing is complete key to ultimate, Tex-Mex, Mexican food type stuff.
So thank God that's over.
Kevin Harrington. Hi, Kevin. Kevin actually asked several things. Kevin says on this one, so obviously Wampler makes fantastic pedals, arguably, but there are several other components to a pedal board. What advice can you provide on the subject of the importance of quality cables, both instrument cables and pedal connectors, power supplies, pedal order, and making our pedal boards more efficient? Well, Kevin, wow, there's a bunch there. So I would say this is completely my opinion. This is not the gospel truth, because there is no such thing as the gospel truth of pedal board stuff. So for me, I like good quality cables. Okay, there's two of my favorite brands. One of them is Hosa, and I love these. And the other one that I can't find right now, I think I don't see it laying around. I must have put it up yesterday. But it's BTPA. Both those two companies, nothing wrong with other ones. In fact, Rattlesnake Cable's a good friend of mine. I don't have any of his yet. I probably should, because he's a super good guy. But right now, I'm using BTPAs and Hosa. And I just think it's not really like a sound thing. It's more of a durability thing. I can drag them behind a truck for like 10 miles and they'll still work. I can, throw them in a bag and throw them in the back of a car and basically just abuse them, and they always work. That's a big one for me. I always use a buffer, and I think the real high-end cables, if you're using a buffer up front, you're not going to notice that much difference. You may notice a little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, your tube amp's going to sound different than any change in cables from, place to place and temperature and everything else. So I don't put that much of importance on like stupidly high quality cables. I just think there's more important things to worry about. Same thing with power. I mean, I think what I'm using on the board is, I believe they're cables that were made by BTPA, and for a pedal board, I have a little sideboard that I take places, and it's just a little small board. And what I think I'm just using like a daisy chain from Visual Sound or True Tone or whatever it's called now. And that's just a quick, board I can put together and throw it in the back of the car and take it somewhere. Power supplies is a big deal. Some power supplies are really noisy. Some say they're isolated outputs, and they're really not isolated outputs. And you'll notice that with a power supply that's just not a high quality, you're going to have a lot more noise, and you may have some hums and other types of things that a higher quality power supply would get rid of. There's several different types I like. True Tone makes a good one. Voodoo, of course, makes a good one. I've been using the Friedman stuff because Dave's a good friend of mine, and he just came out with, I think it was pretty recent, came out with a power supply. It's fantastic. So I've been using the Friedman power supplies on our show boards, and you never know, maybe we'll make one soon. Who knows? Pedal order, I mean, you hear so many people talk about pedal order. Like, there's just tons. Everyone has their opinion on what the right pedal order is. There is no right pedal order. I mean, that's just the truth. The truth is that the right pedal order is the one that you like. Now, I have my preferences. I like compression, overdrive, distortion, maybe a little more overdrive after that. I don't really use chorus that much. If I was going for the 80s thing, I'd run it after distortion. Vibe before dirt, wah before dirt, delays, reverbs, phase I put before dirt, flange I put before dirt. Just a personal preference. EQ after any dirt or in the effects loop, especially if I'm using like a dirt channel from, like a Marshall or, something like that. So if I'm using dirt from the amp, then I'll throw the delays, reverbs, choruses, EQ. I'll throw that all in the effects loop, pretty much, unless the effects loop just sucks. And in which case, then I just try to make it work however I can. Sometimes you can put a buffer inside the effects loop, and it helps solve some problems with pedals. Sometimes not. Sometimes you got to kill some volume going into your pedals, like with a volume pedal, and then boost the volume back up with like a clean booster, like our dB plus or decibel plus or any sort of clean booster. Sometimes you can do that. That also can cause more noise, because anytime you increase gain, you can get more noise and stuff. Just making your pedal boards more efficient. I mean, the big thing is just be smart about how you connect power, I think, honestly. So if you have an adapter and you have everything daisy chained, just please understand it's going to be noisier than normal. It just is. Especially if you're connecting pedals that have different digital components to it, whether it is bypass, like the relay bypass actually has a digital component to it. Basically, that switch is talking to this microcontroller, saying, hey, when this guy hits the switch, make sure you turn those relays on and off in this sort of fashion. So you have like this digital ground plane and power for the digital. There's all this complicated crap that goes along with it inside the pedal that can add to noise when you start stringing those all together. So I like to run all that stuff on an isolated output. Strictly digital pedals, mechanical switches, strictly analog pedals, mechanical switches, like, you're talking distortion plus, tube screamers, stuff like that. They don't use that much power, and you can pretty much get away with daisy chaining several of those in a row. It's not a big deal. But like I said, at a pinch, on my board, when I'm taking to a gig somewhere, the noise that I'm getting is not anything the audience is going to notice. So I don't really even worry about that. Unless becomes like a gigantic problem, and then I got to, but I prefer to not have to worry with in that situation. I just like a grab and go sort of thing. Kevin Fowler asks, have you messed with any of the microphone modeling systems like Slate's digital VRS8? Thoughts on the technology? It's more of a home recording question, but it's a spillover from guitar amp modeling. Actually, Kevin, I haven't messed with it much, but I did see, I think it was a YouTube video from Nam. It was when the band was going by and he got really kind of pissed off about it. The band was going by and got angry, and he was trying to show, the technology. I think it was that VSR8. And I thought, actually, it sounded really cool. I thought the idea of it and the implementation and the way that he went about it was pretty great. And he's known to do really good stuff, and he's a bright dude. So, yeah, I'm into it. But I also like plugins too, even though I work with pedals and amps and, hardware. I also love plugins and all kinds of stuff like that. I'd like to mess with Midi controllers and just have fun with Logic Pro. That's another favorite pastime of mine. So yeah, totally into it. Tom Gilliam asked, do certain pedals work better with certain tube types and pickup types? It's not so much about the tube, it's about the amp in general. So, yeah, some pedals work better, for example, with a Vox. I'm sorry, some pedals work better with a Vox. Some pedals work better with like a blackface type of thing. Some pedals might work better with a Marshall. And better is in air quotes because there is no better. So I may think that a tube screamer sounds wonderful on a Blackstar and horrible on a Blackstar. On a blackface, I may think that a tube screamer sounds wonderful on a blackface style amp, but maybe I think it's horrible on a Vox style amp, but you may not. And I don't feel that way, but I'm saying just for an example, it's really all down to, I say this all the time, there's no right thing. It's just my opinion, and I'm just a dude who makes pedals and, talks to cameras on YouTube. I don't really think there is a real answer. I think that it's just opinion. So I like Klon style stuff or tube screamer type stuff into a dirty amp, especially when it's like a Marshall type of thing, and also into a crank blackface if I can crank it up all the way and get that amp itself distorting. It's a little flubby on the bottom end, so I'll use like a Klon style pedal with its tumnus or whatever. I'll use that style of pedal or a tube screamer and just kind of shape the overall EQ before it. So I think dirt pedals in general tend to be way more finicky with amps, the whole architecture of the amp itself, rather than whether it's a KT88 or 6L6. I don't think it's really based on the power tube that much. Pickup types absolutely as well. So there's some pickups that are really hot. Whenever you go into certain type of distortion circuits, you can actually oversaturate that. Like there's a circuit called a mu amp, and our Pinnacle's based on it. The Brownie, I think, from CMAT's based on. There's a bunch of pedals that are based on mu amp or mu amp, depending on where you're from. Here we call it mu amp, but sometimes I use them interchangeably. But when they're based on that sort of technology, running at 9 volts with certain types of FETs, sometimes you'll have a little bit of oversaturation. You can kind of compensate with that. We've done videos on this. You can kind of compensate with lowering your pickup a little bit so it's not quite so close to the string. That does help. I think that you'll find guitars in general will sound radically different. So, if I'm playing a Les Paul versus a Stratocaster, if I'm running through a tube screamer and then I'm running through a deluxe reverb, two radically different sounds. They're going to respond differently. They're going to with the pedal and with the amp. They're going to respond differently. They're going to sound different, of course, and you may not get the same result. Richard Boyer asks, what drives Wampler innovation? What, if any, new technology will change the direction of how we pursue the ultimate tone? What drives us is really what customers think, what they say, how they feel about what we're putting out, what others are putting out, the comments they ask us to include on, pedal ideas. All that stuff really is what drives us. I'm not, for the most part, there's exceptions, but for the most part, I don't really feel like we're the type of company where I just build what I want, and if you guys like it, then fine. I like to kind of approach it more like I exist because of you. If it wasn't for you guys who bought our stuff or who were interested in our stuff, we simply wouldn't exist, and this would be nothing but a hobby. So I'm kind of indebted to you. So everything I do, whether it's videos, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, all the content, all the blog stuff. That is basically an attempt to try to help you guys, to bring value to you, to entertain you, to bring you some sort of information that may help you and give you some sort of enjoyment. So, same thing with pedals. Your second part, Richard, is what, if any, new technology will change the direction of how we pursue the ultimate tone? In my opinion, it seems like music trends kind of changed the ultimate tone. So I'm kind of an old dude. I'm 43 years old right now. I was a young kid, but I still was around playing guitar in the 80s. So I remember very vividly when, people were using one of my favorite preamps. When people were using ADA MP1s and you had to have that in your rack. And your rack was the size of a refrigerator. And you had all kinds of rack effects in that thing. And I remember that time. I also remember whenever there were people that were going to the crate amps and the solid state stuff, kind of gravitating toward that a little bit towards the later 80s. Then it kind of went back and people got rid of the rack stuff and went more to pedals. And that was the alternative rock movement, I guess, or the grunge movement. They called it back then. I hated that term alternative. It's like boutique. I don't consider us boutique. It's just a silly word. But anyways, there you go, man. And then lastly, Kevin Harrington says, how would you improve my board? How would you improve my pedal board? Kevin, my friend, we know each other very well from the Wampler Tone Group on Facebook, don't we? Yes, we do. I'm going to have to be honest with you. You need to invest in zip ties. It will make your life easier, more simple, and it will clean your board up. As far as pedal placement, I mentioned this earlier, that you can look at that for pedal placement. Maybe have power covered, I don't know. And maybe you might need to upgrade your power, I don't know. See what you think. If you're having noise problems, maybe think of upgrading it. If not, don't worry about it. But yeah, zip ties, my friend.
And thanks so much for listening to the Chasing Tone podcast. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email podcast@wamplerpedals.com. If it's a great question I think a lot of people are going to get value from, then I will put it on the podcast. If not, then I can actually make a video from it, which that actually happened this week where a customer commented on something. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.